Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. I am alone tonight. Todd has taken the night off, but I have the good fortune of being with someone who probably doesn't need a whole lot of introduction based on the amount of downloads from our last podcast. Mr. Dan Infalt is with us. Dan, how's it going tonight?
Going good. How you doing?
Doing well. I understand you just got out of the timber. I was on child duty tonight, so I didn't get out. I did get a chance to ride around, but how was the timber tonight?
It was good. It was a good night. I had a good buck real close, which is the first time all season. So that was interesting.
One that you had been targeting?
Yeah. I didn't get a real good look at it, but I know it was a definite shooter. And I went in there specifically targeting an animal that my partner seen there a few days ago, and I got some video of it, and it's definitely Boone and Crockett. I had it at about 10 yards, if you want to believe that, but it was in thick cover. I wasn't intending on killing something. I was intending on observing, but it's a kill position potentially, but it's more of an observation position for me where I can overlook a swamp, and I know that buck was in there somewhere, and I wanted to try and get a beat on him in a direction to travel and where he's going kind of thing. So I got way up a tree, and he ended up being bedded only about 25 yards from me in some thick cover in the swamp from my point.
Oh, wow. So he was bedded that close to you, but didn't hear you get in, didn't hear you put up your sticks and stand, etc.?
It was a little windy out, and it was poplars, so they're making a lot of noise, so I was able to slide in there. I had the perfect wind, the perfect kind of wind. Otherwise, I was going to kind of stay out of there, but everything kind of lined up today, and you don't get too many east winds. So we had an east wind, which I needed for that, and we had a heavy wind, so I could get real close to the bedding. And so I got in there, really slowly, quietly climbed a tree and sat up there, and really nothing moved until almost closing time. That buck got up with only like 5 minutes to closing, and he never moved out of that brush. He came real close to me, and I thought he was going to step out. And I was ready. I had the bow ready. I was in position. But he turned around and just made his way the other way. I really couldn't see him very well, just that he had a big cage on because I was looking through dogwood. But I got my direction of travel. I know where he's heading. And it's kind of where I figured, but it was a guess, and it's good to know rather than guess. So,
without giving away too much, because I know there's plenty of people that probably follow you around and stupid stuff like that, but when you get on a buck like this, how is it that you've gotten on him? Is it that you've gotten trail cameras pictures of him, or is it that you just have history and know that deer's there, or is it from riding around and running into him, or is it just purely from sign and it's probably a big deer, sort of like I guess probably like a Brad Coonert would do?
Yes, it's a little bit of all of that. But this particular buck...
Now that sounds like a political answer.
Well, it is, though. It is. I mean, there's plenty of bucks I get on because of a trail camera picture. There's plenty of bucks I get on because I glass them. There's plenty of bucks I get on because I find sign and hunt it down. I don't know what I'm hunting until I see it. This particular case... this is a buck that last year, I'm sure you've seen that Chasing the Dream video. That buck walked under me 2 times last year as a little 10-pointer with a little kicker off of one tine, probably like 130 class. and I let him go both times. And he's just ballooned up into a real big buck this year. So, as a matter of fact, where we're seeing him now is, I want to say 50 yards from maybe 100 yards from where I saw him twice last year as a 2-year-old. So I have history with the buck. We weren't hunting that buck when Mario saw him, but when he saw him and we got video of him, I'm like, I know that buck, and it's him. I mean, he's got the same little sticker. It's just the rack is twice the size now as a 3-year-old. Imagine if that deer gets to 4 when he jumps that big to 3, eh?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, I got to tell you, since the last time we spoke, there's so much to take in when we start to talk about deer hunting, because the basics of deer hunting are about as basic as the basics of rocket science when it really comes down to it. And I was just dying to pick your brain, about situational things. Now that I've started this whole public land thing, it's everything that you said it would be. It's everything everyone who has any experience dealing with public land has said it would be. I guess I wanted to start by asking you, for a guy or a gal who has started this without the benefit of any history whatsoever, and again, obviously I'm talking about myself, what is the best methodology that you could suggest for giving yourself the best chance to shoot a mature deer, other than hunting where there's a mature deer?
Well, you got to dive around. You got to move a lot. I mean, even when you got a little bit of history, you don't know for sure if that buck's still around. You know what I'm saying? If it's been a year or whatever, sometimes you do. Sometimes you got a recent trail cam pick, but a lot of times I'm diving into stuff unknown where I just know it's a good area or whatever, or a good swamp, and I want to find something big. And a lot of my hunts this year, I went into spots that have been good in the past, and you get in there and there's no sign and you don't see much. Well, I'm moving on. Now, next hunt ain't going to be the next point over. I'm going to move to a whole new area because there's no big buck sign in there, so you just got to keep moving until you get into something hot. And a lot of my season at this point right now is trying out different public properties, getting in there and seeing what it looks like, seeing if something's around. Usually those big bucks leave some sign that they're there, and if they're around, I throw some more hunts at it. If there doesn't seem to be a lot of sign, I move on to the next property, But that keeping on moving is huge. You got to cross paths with those big ones, and if you sit in the same area, there's a good chance you won't. Okay.
You just mentioned sign, and I think, in sign is a pretty broad term. What specifically, I know it's different at different times of the year, but say, for instance, right now, what gets Dan Infalt's attention the most?
The big rubs that are high up is something that I notice real easily, that you see from a distance. And if they're fresh, deer just came out of velvet 2-3 weeks ago, so that buck's around someplace. One thing that really caught my attention in the place I was hunting tonight is my first hunt in there, I found over a half dozen fresh scrapes. And at this time of the year, to find scrapes is usually a good sign, and to find that many. And then there was high numbers of rubs that tell me that there's bucks competing. High numbers of rubs around the bedding areas. So that tells me there's multiple bucks in there, competing for the area.
Definitely big rubs, and then the presence of a bunch of scrapes.
Yeah, more importantly than big is high, how high up the rub is. Mature bucks rub trees, at least in the Midwest, about waist high or higher to the center of the rub. When they're around your knee height, even if they're on a bigger tree, they're usually a 2-year-old.
So you're looking to find some rubs ideally something waist high, and then as a bonus, you'd also like to see some scrapes, and the more scrapes, typically the better. Why do you say the more scrapes the better, in your opinion?
Well, it just means that there's a lot of bucks around, right? But to see a lot of scrapes at this time of the year, I mean, usually you don't even find scrapes at this time of the year, and I'm finding a ton of them in that particular area. For some reason, they're really competing for those spots. So the one area that I was watching tonight, for instance, we might not have gone back there because it kind of dried up on the food and stuff, but walking around that swamp perimeter, everything surrounding that swamp perimeter has big rubs coming out of it, fresh scrapes, and every day there's new ones. So that tells me there's something living in there. So even if I burn that bridge, I'm going back to find out what's going on. We hunted Mario hunted in there twice. So for me to go back, it takes something to do that. I'm not going to go back to like rut or something now until I started seeing two new scrapes come out of there. One of them's the size of a car hood and a couple of big rubs. And I thought, well, something's still going through that little funnel. And I thought maybe if I got right on the edge, a lot of guys will sit in those points, towards the center of them or something, where my goal with this wind was to get right on the edge where I could get up a tree and see into the swamp. And that's important, because a lot of times I'm not going to kill them in those setups. But if I can get my eyes on him and see the travel path he's taken, I can see some flaw in it where I can kill him, And really, if I wouldn't have got on the tip right in the last very tree I could get in that's hanging out over the water, I would never even known that buck was there if I would have been more centered and kind of covering that came up on the point.
Another thing that I wanted to ask, based on our last conversation, was we talked a lot about wind, the leeward side, getting on the leeward side. Let me just set up sort of a situation in your mind, if I could. Let's say you've got just a perfect square, and on the east half of the square, there's timber. On the west half, there's agriculture. In the timbered part, there's, let's say, the typical hill country ridge. So as I go through my mind, based on our last conversation, I'm thinking, well, that deer's not going to have a bedding area for one particular wind just because there's no timber on the back side of it. Is that fair or accurate to say, or is there something that I'm not catching in what we talked about? What is it that I missed? Because I know that I missed something. What is it that I missed that?
So you're saying you've got a ridge that's only one directional.
Yeah.
And you're saying that
Yep.
It's just bare open fields the other
Yep.
way, so they can't bed
Yep.
there, right? So they're going to find ways to either bed on that hill or they're going to be in the neighbor's property. I would say you're probably going to find your better bucks there when the wind is correct for them, number one. Number two, they'll take the little knobs and stuff, and they'll find ways to bed around them on a different wind. I mean, okay, so say there's a point or a knob coming off of that, and the wind's blowing from the field, right? You can take that angle and turn it like 45 degrees both ways, and you can go around the other side of the knob and still have a leeward wind. So if you got a little point or a little change in the terrain there on a little bench or something, that's why you'll have the whole radius of that point will have beds all the way around it, because they move based on the wind direction. Another thing is if that wind turned completely around, it was blowing straight at the field, a lot of times they'll go bed right on the edge of the field. And they'll watch the field with the wind at the back, and that's what they do in farm country a lot. Like in those blocks of timber. Or they'll bed in the woods, on the hill, or down at the bottom where there's a thick edge. And the same thing they'll do with like farm country or big woods, where they'll get right on the edge of that thick with the wind to their back, looking out at the open. Another thing they'll do is they'll find a little, like a draw that's got kind of a bowl shape to it, and they'll get down in the middle of it, down low, and no matter what way the wind's going, it swirls around in there, and they get your wind from all directions. So they find little things with the terrain to get around the bad winds.
So there's going to be some structural feature in that piece of property that's likely to allow them to bed with the wind at their advantage, even if they're not on the opposite side, like you would think in your mind's eye that it would need to be, right?
Right. One thing's for sure, they're not just going to bed in the middle of an open slope. There's a reason for where they bed. And when you find a mature buck's bed, you're gonna look at it and go, oh, you know what I'm saying? There's an awakening when you see a mature buck's bed you'll see random beds from other deer, from younger deer, from fawns, from doe groups, from small bucks. But when they get mature, there doesn't seem to be anything random about the way they bed.
And is there a different look to a mature deer's bed than an immature deer, or let's say the difference between a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old?
To me, the only difference I really see is the layout.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean a 2-year-old won't lay there, and it doesn't mean a 1-year-old won't lay there. Well, but you don't see a mature buck usually using a bedding area unless it's laid out correctly. I mean, when you look at it, you look at one of them beds, and you're like, how the heck would I get near this thing without getting busted? And that's the aha moment when you look at them, because they're hidden so well, but they've always got a sight and scent advantage. I guess after 4 or 5 years of us chasing them, they get that down.
Yeah, I mean, if someone was trying to kill me for 5 years in a row, I think I'd have it figured out. If I didn't die the first couple, I think, yeah, you'd have a pretty good handle on how to survive. The one thing that I have to say from our first conversation, and again, I've watched a lot of your stuff over the last few years. Certainly. Hill country bedding became my go-to this year because, my situation. But after we had our conversation, I know I texted you a picture because I thought, all right, I know where there's a piece of public. It's a VPA piece, not too far from here, and I knew that it was a big hill, and I knew that I could check several different fingers, and I got down there. And I started from the bottom to work my way up, and I found a trail, and I kind of, tried to put myself between the what I thought would be the bedding and the food, and then halfway up, I probably cursed your name a couple times because I was in such thick stuff, and then I thought, there's no way that a deer is going to plow through this until I got down on my hands and knees. Honestly, literally on my hands and knees, and I could see where there was a distinct trail. So I plowed through there and found the trail, and lo and behold, on that 1/3, certainly the leeward side, there it was, a bed, a big bed, up against a log. I don't know if you remember the picture I sent you or not, but, it was pretty, it was almost as fun finding that as it was finding a shed. And I know that they're probably not very comparable, but it was pretty satisfying. So for anybody that doesn't subscribe to this theory, I'd encourage anybody to watch that video and then go put it to use. You're going to find beds. There's no question about it.
What is amazing is for the doubters, and I hear this a lot, is that they go out to prove me wrong, and that's when they prove themselves wrong, because those beds will be right exactly where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. It was opening week this year. If I can just quick interject another story as sort of proof that you're 100% spot on. And that's that I met a buddy, Sam Hogan, who used to work for Fourth Arrow Camera Arm, and some other guys from Michigan, and we were hunting some property, and they had heard of you, and I had gone in and I had hunted this property based on everything that you said, and I know I texted you that night, and I got into I got into a deer that I ultimately passed up. And once we got to the point where we knew we weren't going to hunt it anymore, I just said to Sam, I'm like, go in there and because they were getting ready to leave and go back to Michigan, and find out, if there are beds on that 1/3, level. And it just so happened that the access and the road to several different hunting properties happens to be at the end of this ridge. And I remember you saying in our last podcast, don't be surprised if there's deer watching you get out of your truck and get ready, because that's just what big bucks will do at times. And I'll be darned if he didn't text me and then give me a phone call after that he had gone into the 1/3, below that military crest. I think that's how you describe it, right? And then he said there was beds all over that, and then once he got down, he said you could see clearly right down to the road. So yeah, for anybody that's a doubter, that's there's no doubting it anymore. That's for certain. So when you get into the sign, and you found enough sign, it sounds to me like you're sort of backtracking it back towards where you believe it is that they're bedded. And then what do you do from there? Do you set up close to where you think they're bedding?
I usually sit back and do some observation hunts and make my way around, and at some point when I think I got a handle on things, I go in for the kill, and I go right in for the heart, and I either blow it or I kill the deer.
So you've got to be willing to blow that whole spot out.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of guys are so afraid to pull their opportunity that they never kill nothing. They sit back too much. They try to stage your way up to a deer a little closer each time, and that ain't what kills deer. Those deer, it's like, pardon my French, but it's like slapping them on the ass and saying, "Game on, I'm hunting you." You want to catch them by total and complete surprise. You want them to not know what's coming. You got to get into that window where they move around in daylight freely, and get the job done. So, I'll pussyfoot around for a while and see what's going on. Try to get up real high where I can see. Try to see a certain little opening or whatever. Whether or not I can or I do will make a big difference. But sooner or later, you got to go in for the kill. And when you do, you go in all the way. I set up. I'm usually, in swamp terrain, I'm 75 yards on average from the bed, sometimes 50, sometimes 100. In hill country like you're talking, I'm probably on average about 200 yards away from the bed. So you're pretty close. Sometimes I'm taking an educated guess based on rubs coming out of an area, how well I know an area or whatever. And sometimes I know the bedding areas from pre-scouting. Sometimes I don't. But you got to take a shot.
When you're looking at those rubs, are you looking at what side of the tree the rub is on, and then are you making the assumption that they're coming from that direction? If it's on the north side of the tree, would it be fair to say that they're coming from the north side, or at least a northerly direction?
I've heard that a lot, and I don't know if it holds weight or it don't, but you can usually just look at the trail and see which way they're coming from, or look at the rub line, and I don't see them making rub lines usually going into bedding areas. They're usually coming out, so it's not to say they don't rub going into a bedding area, but I mean, those rub lines are usually the trail they're coming out on. So you got to remember too, when a buck goes into a bedding area, they go in wind and nose. When they come out down that defined trail. And I know this from watching them for years and years and years, watching them come in and out of bedding areas. So that defined trail is their exit trail. When they go in the morning, they want to smell that bed safe, and they want to get in line with that wind to the nose. Go to that bed, turn around, and then look downwind and look right down their scent trail. And, you say a deer can't reason, but it just, I don't know if it's instinct or what, but they're smart enough that they have only one scent trail. They have their ground scent and their wind scent in line, and they sit there and they face it and look down it, and they're smelling anything coming from behind because they walked into the wind, right? Turned around at the bed. They're looking back down the trail. It's a pretty ingenious way of bedding. But because of that, you don't have that defined bed or rub line coming in the morning when they go to bed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, they're trying to make sure that they're safe, right? Is essentially right. What you're saying.
What I'm saying is that trail to the bed changes slightly every time they come in, when they come in the morning.
Yeah, in your video, I think you referred...
coming in straight into the wind.
Okay, yeah. I think you referred to it in your video as a J-hook almost.
Yeah, a lot of times in hill country, they J-hook. They come down to the bottom of the hill, and then they hook back up, yeah.
How steep... we'll get back on track here in a second. I'm sorry, we're rabbit trailing a bit, but how steep is too steep in hill country?
If they can't stand up. they go up like billy goats. I mean, there's stuff where I watch those deer walk up and down those hills, but I don't know if it's because they got four legs or what, but I can't walk up and down those hills. Some of them so steep, especially when you get out to like far western Wisconsin where you really get to like the bluff country.
Yeah.
You got to literally get on all fours to get up those hills.
Yep. But
deer just walk up and down them. But usually what they do is if you go up there to that 1/3, there's usually a trail cut. I mean, almost like how a logging trail cuts a flat into the side of the hill.
Sure.
Those deer will cut a little flat trail by walking in that same spot all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, I don't know. You've probably seen it.
I have. Yeah, it saved my life the other night. It's a speed bump
that stops you while you're flying down the hill, right?
Exactly. I was in far western Wisconsin, and I had called the landowner, just because I like to do that, whether it's public or not. And I talked to him, and he said, "Yeah, I didn't get a chance to cut the trails, but there's a trail down the middle of that ridge." Well, okay, I got in there, I hunted, I did what I came to do. And I thought, all right, I'm going to get out of here early. I'm going to blow out whatever's in here because it's still super early in the season, and whether that's a bad idea or not, I don't know, and I guess I'll find out. But I took that trail that I saw that went down the ridge. What he failed to tell me and what I failed to ask him is, does the trail go all the way down the ridge? Well, no, it doesn't. It got to the edge of a cliff and it stopped. And I'm like, well, now I'm 3/4 of a mile too far, back to the truck to go back another 3/4 of a mile. How am I going to do this? Well, I did it basically like you said. I grabbed onto it, one tree to the next tree to the next tree. And then all of a sudden, boom, on that 1/3 or about that 1/3, here's a trail cut, perfectly into the side of that hill. And that saved my butt. Well, I think, we talked a lot about the wind, and I think, some people have a pretty good grasp on, determining the wind. A lot of it's really getting out there. I mean, you can watch your video, and that's a great place to start, and I would recommend that to anybody. Would you say, though, that going out there and experiencing it yourself and using the milkweed like you suggest and things like that will help you to completely put it all together? I mean, watching your video gives you a foundation, but is that a must, going out there and using that milkweed just to see what it actually does? Because every area is a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not so much that everything's a little different. It's more that, no matter what we do, you can't really put it perfectly in a video exactly how everything works and how it goes. And even if you could, it would make the video so boring that we'd watch it because it'd be 200 hours long. But you're not gonna watch a DVD and be a great hunter. What you are going to get out of a DVD is you're going to get some a little jump in your learning curve. Because if you've already been hunting and you watched a video, kind of like yourself when you watched it, there's going to be a couple of aha moments where you're going to say, "That's why." And there's going to be some eye-opening things, and you're going to learn some things about bedding, some things about deer habitat that you didn't probably know. but that ain't going to make you a killer. Getting out there and applying it and trying it for yourself is going to make you a killer. And some boots on the ground and some making mistakes. And I think the mistakes is the hugest one. I think people don't get that, but I make very few mistakes because I once made a lot of mistakes. This foundation is what teaches you. You got to fail in order to succeed. That failure is huge. A lot of guys will take failure and they'll dwell on it. They'll get mad, they'll get angry because they wounded a deer or because they didn't see anything for a week. You know, look at me. I've been hunting for 2 weeks now. Is it 2 weeks? I think it's 2 weeks, right?
Yep, 2 weeks.
I've only not hunted one day. I go to work every morning at 2 a.m. I'm so burnt out you wouldn't believe it. and today was the first day I saw a shooter buck. But it doesn't discourage me one bit. You see other people who get so discouraged when they hunt several days in a row and don't see something. And I, by all rights, should have seen something good by now, you know. But my point is all how you look at it. You know, I always look at it, if I haven't seen one in 2 weeks, well, I must be getting really close, you know, because I've burnt out everything else. You've got to be in the last remaining spots, you know. But a lot of it's mindset, you know, and a lot of it's application. And you got to have confidence and attitude. And those are built up by spending time in the woods, by hunting, by, you know, being out there. You know, I go out and every hunt I go out, I truly believe I'm going to kill a monster or I'm going to see the buck I'm after. And I believe that because of confidence. And when I fail, I go back out there the next day and I still believe it. I believe it again the next day. And if you go out there doubting yourself, you're going to fail and you're not going to learn from it. You need to learn from your mistakes, you know, that failure.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I can completely relate to that. First of all, you completely deflated my balloon when you said that I wasn't going to learn it all from the DVD. I thought I had stuff completely figured out and I was just going to show up and shoot a booner, but so I guess I can throw that out the window.
Well, you know that the video does do a good job of boosting people's confidence in their belief, because I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of guys say that they, you know, watched a video and they went out there and they're going to kill one and, you know, and it doesn't happen. And, you know, a lot of the guys in the site, like on my hunting site, have told me that it took them about 2 years to master it. And now they kill bucks like crazy, using the system kind of that the videos set up. But it took them a couple of years to really master it by in-field use. I mean, by going out and, you know, scouting and hunting hard and I mean, basically, you're taking everything people have been taught about staying away from bedding areas and, you know, hunting food sources instead, or hunting a scrape or a rub, and you're throwing it all out the window and telling them to try something completely new. You know, it's like expecting to get on a motorcycle because you read the manual. The manual helped you. It got you started. It taught you how to turn it on. It taught you how to steer. It taught you how to, you know, shift your weight. But you got to do that. And you gotta apply it to that motorcycle in order to ride a motorcycle from just riding a car, right? And deer hunting's no different. It's, you know, I can tell you what to do, but you got to go out there and you got to actually apply it.
It gets you to the party, but it doesn't it doesn't complete the party. It doesn't, you know. There's not a guaranteed happy ending. And yeah, if there's one thing I've learned, it's funny that we're sitting here talking about it Wednesday night when I was out on this piece of property where I ended up nearly rolling down the hill. I got up there and I thought, what am I doing? You know, I've seen very, very little sign, you know, and I'm just thinking, what am I doing? Good God, this is stupid. I should just get down, get back in my truck, go home, hang out with my wife till it's the rut. And then I thought, you know what? I know what I know, and I know that there's deer here because I found a few rubs, nothing big, nothing waist high. I found some scrapes, nothing big, you know, but there were deer there. So I set up and you know what? Some deer walked by me. I ended up seeing, what I would think was a shooter, probably 120, 130, yards away in the timber. And you know, I couldn't 100% say it was a shooter, but I'm going with it that it was a shooter. I'm glad that I did. But you're right. It takes time and it takes confidence. And there's just no replacement for that. Time is time, and you just get.
Everybody nowadays wants that easy route. They want you to just hand them something and it's instant. And the truth of the matter is, if you're going to start killing big bucks, and you're going to do it on public land and such, it takes work and it takes time. And it's not something that you can just throw $100 on and buy, but people want that. It's today's society, and I think we've all got a little of that in us because it's been kind of bred into society.
Yeah, there's no question about it. That's definitely part of the problem, and it's certainly a lot of the way that we're all programmed, just because that's the world around us. There's probably one thing that hasn't changed, and that's the way a whitetail survives, and that's why you have to continue to try again. It just takes time. One thing that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to talk about is, a lot. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your theory, a lot of your tactics are based on early season stuff, getting close to their beds, getting them between the bed and the food. Although I know you talk about the rut a lot of times in your video, but does the rut change the way that you use the wind? Or do you throw it out the window? What is it that you do once October 15th hits the calendar and, the game starts to change a little bit?
Well, it depends on where I'm hunting and how I'm hunting. But if I'm hunting mature bucks, I'm still hunting bedding. Big bucks don't run around the ridges all day long chasing does during rut. They just don't. There's younger bucks, and people are getting 2 and 3 year olds and stuff. And if you think about what everybody's got on their walls, most of it's from rut, and most of them don't have a buck from every year during the rut, right? If you do what everybody else is doing, you're going to get the results that everybody else is getting. The biggest stuff I've shot during rut, I've shot out of bedding areas. I shot one a few years back on some public by my house that everybody was after. I shot it on October 31st, which around here is peak rut. It's a little later over where you're at, I think. But peak rut, it came out at, I think I saw it get out of its bed at a half an hour before closing. And by the time it got 50 yards to where I could shoot it, it was about closing time when I shot it. What chance would you have sitting in a funnel, or over on a ridge waiting for me to come down the leeward side? That's not to say that I don't go hunt that way. Sometimes I do, especially if I'm in a strange area I don't know real well. Bucks are going to run them leeward ridges, but what people don't get is not all bucks are created equal. It's like they change every year. It's almost like different animals. What you see as a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old are a totally different animal than a 3-year-old. And a 4-year-old is a totally different animal than a 3-year-old. And 5-year-olds get almost unkillable on these public lands, even though they're there. You'll get pictures of them and stuff. And there's a reason for that. I mean, they don't run around those ridges chasing does in broad daylight during the rut. If they did, they'd die. I mean, just take a walk around a public land and try to find a ridge to hunt on during the rut. You're going to run into hunters everywhere. Big bucks would get shot in 1 year if they did that. The only reason some people are getting them is because every now and then they make a mistake. And I don't want to have my hunting and what I put on my walls based on hope that a deer will make a mistake the day I hunt. I want to do it on something precision. And that's where he beds and how he moves out of the bed in daylight. And he does that every day.
I guess 2 questions come to mind. I'm going to try and remember. I'm going to actually just write down the second one. You mentioned the bucks are going to cruise the leeward ridges. Again, just so everyone understands, a leeward ridge is the side opposite what the wind is hitting. In other words, the wind is carrying over top of that side of the ridge, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in the rut, when you're going to set up, if you could, let's say you're in hill country, because that's most when we're talking about leeward ridges. Where is it that you would go ahead and set up?
Okay, on a leeward ridge, a buck is going to set or cruise through there about 1/3 from the top down. When the wind comes over, he'll be able to smell from above that wind right about where he's at, and he'll also be where the thermals come up to during daylight. So he's going to be where they meet. So there's kind of like a mixing of the air there, what I call the wind tunnel. And they'll go down that wind tunnel on these ridges, and they'll cruise there. And if you've ever hunted that way, you'll know what I'm talking about, because those deer cruise those ridges like you wouldn't believe. But it's mostly, young middle-aged ones, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. Not to say that those are bad bucks. I mean, the buck that I'm after right now is a 3-year-old. He's Boone and Crockett. But they cruise those leeward ridges. The trouble with it is it does get a little hard to get in there without getting winded, because wind coming from two directions. You got it colliding and swirling around and that kind of thing. One thing I like to do to combat that is go to the top of draws, or where there's trees laying down on the ridge or something, and the deer have to go out of that tunnel and go around an obstacle. Or say there's a cliff and they have to go down through a valley and up onto the next ridge. Or some other turn or something where they have to go through a break to connect those two ridges or something. I like to hunt them at those points where they can't really wind me. If I do hunt right on the leeward ridge, I like to get real high and get in the wind stream above the turbulence.
And you do go over that pretty. You go over that pretty thoroughly in your video. I can remember the graphic that you guys had made that shows, the higher you get up, the better chance you have that wind is going to go far above the deer's head.
Yeah, I got that hunting there too that I did down at Andre's place. We were hunting. This is a perfect example of what you're talking about. He had this real big old 8-pointer there that he didn't want to put his tag on because he was after something really big, but he was okay with the 8-pointers getting shot, and I didn't mind shooting that thing. It was a huge buck to me. So I went down there and was going to hunt it with an Iowa tag, and I went and hunted that whole farm. I couldn't find that buck. I had bucks going by me like crazy. All in those leeward ridges, just nuts, But I couldn't locate that buck, and I kept looking around, and I went through about 10 days of hunting without even getting an eyeball on it. And me and Andre were having dinner, and he says, I think I know where that buck is. He says, I'm getting trail camera pictures of it around this one ridge. And he says, and he had a stand set up there. He says, but the trouble with it is it's so thick, there's only like one spot you can hunt. And he says, and I have a stand set there. He says, but the stand is nosebleed high. He had it like 30 feet up. And the reason for that is that he had it at like 20 feet. And deer kept busting them. And when you check the wind there, your milkweed would suck right down that hole right to the buck. So he noticed that when he put his hand up over his head and dropped the milkweed, it would fly right over the top of everything. And he moved that stand up another 10 or 15 feet and never got busted in that stand again. So, I mean, he's got 100 tree stands on his farm. So, I mean, just about every place you could possibly think to sit, there's almost always a tree stand already there. Which is funny because you still usually kill the bucks when you get down and you put up a stand the first day you put it up, even though the stands are all there. You usually see one out of it. But anywho, I went down to hunt that stand, and that buck was bedding on that ridge. And that ridge is only about 100 yards long, and it's super thick. And I shot him just before last light. He moved that 100 yards in daylight. And that's a managed land. Most of what I'm doing is on public. That's a managed land, and he only moved that far because that's an age class thing. Those older bucks just don't move that far in daylight. And that's a buck that's probably past its prime, 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah, it was a dandy. I can distinctly remember the video. There was a tunnel at best, right down to that deer. You were only going to get one shot, but just what you're saying is just by putting that tree stand up another 10, 15 feet, it eliminated the deer's ability to wind you, essentially.
Right, and the other point to that was that deer only moved that short distance on that ridge, but he stayed in that leeward tunnel. So you still shoot mature bucks in those leeward tunnels, but getting close to their bedding and in between them and the does is probably a good thing, or real close to where the does are bedding and he's bedding, so that you're in that window of movement.
So are you saying then that a mature deer, let's say 5 years old, isn't going to be out having a free-for-all with the rest of them, bopping across the 40-acre cornfield in the middle of the day? That kind of stuff just isn't going to happen unless he's got kicked out of an area.
I'm not saying it don't happen. I'm just saying that it's not as common of an occurrence as people make it out to be.
Right.
I'm saying that if mature bucks ran around like that in daylight, everybody'd be shooting them.
That's a good point.
They make a mistake like that once or twice a year, maybe. They get really worked up. Something's going on at those right in heat right now, and some other rival bucks in the area. Crap happens. They make mistakes, run around like that. But for the most part, mature bucks don't run around in daylight, making mistakes. You got to go in and find them and go after them. Another problem I see people create for themselves is they find a good funnel that deer go through, and they just keep sitting there. And they think because those deer are in rut, they're stupid, and they're not. Or they got this idea that these deer are traveling for miles and miles and miles because of some study they saw or something. And if you look at those studies, that deer might run, a pattern that he goes out like 3 miles for a couple of days during the rut, but then he's right back in his core area, living the way he was. So if you're sitting in that same spot, you could get lucky and one comes passing through. Most likely, you've already seen what's passing through. I can remember sitting a rut funnel, watching from a distance. You see bucks go through there, and there's one that you want to shoot. You move in, and the buck you want to shoot doesn't come by you, and you go there the next day. And watching it from a distance, the buck was going through there constantly. He never shows up again. It's just the young stuff because he smelled you're in there. So that shifting around thing is huge. Don't just keep sitting on the same funnel over and over and over again. So,
with what I'm doing, there may be only 20 acres that's available in one instance or in several instances. There may be only 20, 30 acres, and those are the spots that I'm going to go into and I'm going to hunt only when the conditions for that particular area are perfect. And then essentially I gotta stay out of there is what you're saying, and go to another spot.
So I would be careful not to burn an area out. The only thing, I look at a 20-acre plot. I look at that as one hunt.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the only way I'd look at it differently is if I knew for a fact there's something in there I want to go after. There's a particular buck that for some reason I got it out for. I want to kill that thing. I don't like him. He said something bad about my mom or something. So if that's the case, I will probably go in for the kill. If it doesn't work out, I'll be observing. I'll be hopping around spots where I probably can't kill, but I can see. Observations are so important, and people don't get it. Most people are so into, like, they have so many days to hunt, they got to make a kill, so they got to make sure every one of their hunts count. So they go straight in for the kill all the time, and when they do that, most of the time they blow it because they get in there and they're not exactly where they should be or whatever. I do a lot of sitting back and watching and then moving in. And I think that that's important, but you got to have the confidence to believe that you have enough time to do it. And literally, I guess probably some people don't have the time I have, but I create that time. I don't have that time either. I just make it, A lot of what you talk about, Dan, does revolve around public land hunting. But I don't think, and I guess I'll ask your opinion rather than state my own. Do you think that there's that much difference between hunting public land and private land? In terms of the way you go about it? Very much difference in the way I go about it now. the difference is in the pressure and there is a difference in the animals too. The pressure thing is huge because you don't know who's been where. But for the most part, where I find the bucks, nobody goes. If you're finding tree stands, you're finding hunter signs, you're in the wrong spot. I eliminate 90% of a public land spot, just find a 10% where the deer are. Not only that, but I eliminate 9 out of 10 of the properties and say, well, there's no deer on those, I'm going to this one. And by deer, I mean something I'd be interested in shooting. It's got to have key features, not a lot of pressure. You get the gist, right?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, public land affords you the luxury of doing that, because if you've got 100 acres, which, there isn't one of us that would say, we would turn down having 100 acres, but if you've got 100 acres, let's just be honest, you're going to be limited, and you're going to have a much higher probability of blowing out a mature deer if one's living on that property, than, if you had, 10, 15 different options, like, I guess we all do. We just don't all choose to use those,
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, because now I see that a lot, what you're getting at there with guys who go and they save their money forever, and they work hard, and they're like, I'm going to get my own hunting property, but I don't have to deal with pressure and stuff, and they go buy a 40, or they buy an 80, or maybe 100 acres, and then they proceed to hunt the piss out of it and make it worse than any public land I've ever hunted. And it's almost funny if it wasn't so sad.
Right.
Because it's what they work so hard for. But I've got a 70-acre farm that me and the landowner hunt. And we've been out there twice this year, and we're probably over hunting it. And I think last year, the whole year, we hunted it 3 times. We don't over hunt it. And because of that, it gets better. And spread out and go hit the public too. And these guys get this idea in their head that there are no big bucks on public, and it's just not true. There might be less of them, but you go find the pockets where they're at. You just got to go walk around, find the terrain, the bedding areas, the sign that's near them, and go in and hunt them.
Right.
But you can't just sit yourself on 100 acres and hunt there all the time and expect it to be good.
I think you, in effect, just said, without, I don't want to name any names or give away any positions, but a person that works for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, I had a conversation with recently, and he said, Jason, he actually, it was cool. He called me back for a completely different reason than what we ended up talking about. But he said, Jason, I'll never, ever worry about owning my own land again unless something extremely drastic happens with our government and they get completely stupid and sell off, this public land. He said that, and again, I don't want to encourage everybody to do it, but I'll encourage everybody to do it. He said, I'll never do anything but hunt public land again, because he said it gives me so many more opportunities than what I'd have owning 100 acres that I'd pay for the rest of my life. And that's not to take anything away from anybody who's done that. Again, given the opportunity, we'd probably all, at least think about it for a while. But you're right.
You got to kind of look at why do you hunt?
Right.
I mean, do you hunt for the challenge? Do you for me, as you can imagine, I get a lot of offers to hunt private land. I get a lot of offers to go hunt people's managed lands. I mean, I scout people's properties for them. A lot of these people say, hey, you can come back and hunt if you want. I get a lot of outfitters, hey, you can come down here and hunt free if you talk about it on your site. And I get that all the time. And you know why I don't take it? It's not because I think that that's privileged hunting or anything. I think it's cool. But to me, there's something about going on same piece of property everybody can go on and out doing them. It's like if I can go out there and get the best buck, despite everybody else trying, it's like equal ground. You know what I mean? It's like when you take a look at these guys who go the other route, and we all know them, the TV personalities, they go out and they buy 1,000 acres, they spend everything they don't have, they take out loans and stuff to have it so they can be somebody important, and they literally turn into deer farmers and grow these deer. I mean, there are people out there right now, I don't want to name names either, but that have underground watering systems for their food plots that actually pump fertilizers into the water. I mean, is that hunting anymore? But everything in between that, from owning a property now, say you go and buy that 100 acres, and you're making a payment of, say, $400 a month, let's say, just throwing a number out there, right? $400 a month would buy you a hell of a lot of outfitted and guided hunts all over the country and even other countries. So then you just go on outfitted hunts and have new adventures every week. So it's all a matter of what you want. I'm not saying any of that's wrong, because none of it is. It's just a matter of really a person needs to step back and think about what they want out of life and how much they want to spend for it. Going out and doing it on free public land is great. And I'll tell you what, if you're under the belief you can't kill big bucks on public land, you can do it. But you do have to put some work into it. You have to put some effort into it. You have to go out there and scout, learn the areas. In a lot of cases, you got to take the stands in and out with you. A lot of guys don't like that. But that hard work and killing them, I would rather work harder and spend less at it and still kill the big bucks like everybody else, on an equal playing field.
Yeah, I think you just got to identify what your why is, and like you said, everyone's why is different. My filming partner David and I had this conversation many times, and we're just in different places in our life right now, or he'd be right there along with me all the time. But we got to the point where you mentioned it before, big deer, it's not that they're never going to run across a cornfield in the middle of the day on November 12th. They will. Are you going to put your bets on that, or are you going to put your bets on, the things that we talked about previous to that? And that's the biggest reason that, I kill a 140 or better every 4 or 5 years, I think, is because that's, I hunt in an area that's hunted more than a public hunting ground, or did hunt in an area. And I guess, my why has changed. I want to have that challenge. And like you said, it's different for everybody, and there's not a right or a wrong. It's different for everybody.
A big part of it, I think, is that, people think of it like as a contest. Like, it'd be like, say you comparing what you shoot to what I shoot. You're hunting in a different part of the state. You're not hunting every day. You got a kid. You put more time into your family and stuff. I don't. I put it all into hunting. I'm out there all the time. And for you to compare what you shoot to what I shoot is like me comparing what I shoot to what the Drury shoot, or to what Andre's shooting on his private ranch. It's not apples to apples. How much you got in your pocketbook, how much time you're willing to spend out there, everybody's got a different scenario. So really, people got to stop looking at the neighbor's wall and what they got on their wall, and really just think about themselves. And if you think about it now, nobody really cares what the neighbor has on their wall. They care what they have on the wall. And I don't think, if I didn't even shoot a buck this year, half the people wouldn't even realize it. Next year, nobody'd even say anything about it. They'd say, well, did he ever shoot one last year? Nobody'd even know, because they don't care. Who does it matter to? It matters to me. Just like if you shoot one, it matters to you. And I'm not trying to offend you, but if you shot a buck tomorrow, you show me the picture, I'd be like, congrats, hey, you did it, great job. 2 years, I won't even remember if you shot it. So you're really you're trying to impress yourself. So don't worry about what other people have on the wall. Set your own goals and just go have fun, you know?
I don't think there's a better place to end our conversation than what you just said right there. Well, there you have it, some words of wisdom from a guy who definitely knows what he's talking about and can back it up with some real-world results. I hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you did, please do us a favor and give us a review on iTunes. If you don't know how to do that, just go to the iTunes store, select in the search box, White Knuckle Podcast, and go ahead and, if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, subscribe to it, and then give us a review. We would appreciate 5 stars if you can do that. If you are on Stitcher, basically you're going to do the same exact thing. Google Play is, again, another version of the same thing. So if you need any help with that, just go ahead and call or email us, jason@whiteknuckleproductions.com. If you have any ideas for a show, please definitely let us know. Shoot us a message on our Facebook page. Shoot me a message at jason@whiteknuckleproductions.com. And we'll do our best to get that show on. Next week, you're going to love our mystery guest. I think most of you haven't heard of this gentleman, but once you hear him speak, you'll want to hear more. If you're on the Hunting Beast Forum, you'll have definitely heard of this guy. So look forward to that next week, Monday. I want to remind everybody, as a loyal listener to this podcast, you're entitled to a discount of 15% from the folks over at Ozonics. That discount code is WKP 2017. However, right now, as of yesterday, which is about a week from when this is going to air, they advertised $100 off of the HR 200 and $100 off of the HR 300. So in either case, that's a steal. That makes it even more affordable than it was in the past. So that's almost a third off the 300 and a third off the 200. So great deal. Head over to ozonicshunting.com and you can get all that information there. That's about all I've got for this week. Again, please give us a review. And good luck, be safe, and enjoy those cold fronts. Jason out.